Next to our next conversation now, microfinance banks are licensed by the Central Bank of Nigeria to carry on the business of providing financial services such as savings and deposits, loans, domestic funds transfer, and non-financial services to microfinance clients. So recently, the Central Bank threatened to sanction microfinance banks going beyond the mandate of their operating license to engage in foreign exchange transactions. Fear of the consequences on the low-income earners served by the 880 microfinance have sparked conversations. One, which we'll follow up this morning with Michael Ogunremi, macroeconomist and a fixed income analyst. Great to have you, Michael. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so the CBN is accusing, some microfinance banks of engaging in wholesale banking, foreign exchange transactions, and others. What does this mean?
So when you look at it, I think it all boils down to what the mandate of microfinance bank is, right? The reason why microfinance bank, was set up is basically to cater to the micro segment of the market. So what the CBN notices is the fact that a lot of these banks are beginning to play out of their scope, right? So you have them participating in wholesale banking, and that's in terms of the size of the loans that they're giving. You also have them participating, in the FX market, probably selling to, some clients and probably buying from some clients, and that way, making it two-way arbitrage. And because of the fact that, the CBN is trying to achieve some sort of convergence in the FX markets, what is happening, what microfinance banks, are currently doing is sort of counterproductive, to their aim. So I think that's the whole genesis of the CBN coming out to say that you guys are playing out of your scope, and what you're currently doing is counterproductive to what we're trying to achieve. It's also important to cite that because of the capital requirements of microfinance bank, which is between 200 million and 5 billion, depending on what class of microfinance bank it is, right? It speaks to the CBN that if you are participating in wholesale banking, you don't have the capital base to do that. And so if you're doing it, it simply means that you're threatening your own existence. And because, you recall that, we just came out of a whole set of banking crisis, and the CBN is trying to ensure that the banking system is in sanity. So I think that's the whole idea behind the CBN coming out to say that you guys should put a pause on participating in wholesale banking and FX transaction.
So this threat of sanctions, what are the likely sanctions that the CBN could hand down to the microfinance banks?
Okay, to be very honest, the CBN has a lot. When it comes to sanctions, I think the CBN has quite a whole lot of arsenals to put out sanctions to microfinance bank. One of it could be they could prohibit a particular bank from participating in lending, maybe for a while. It's also possible that they also prevent them from participating in certain activities that were initially in their mandates with the CBN. I mean, so safe to say the CBN has quite a plethora of tools to punish, if that's the word, right? To punish a microfinance bank if they err out of what they're supposed to do.
All right, so there are about 880 licensed microfinance banks in the country with a 1 million naira peg to their maximum loan limit per transaction. What is the impact to microfinance banks, with this sanction?
Okay, so let me start with this. The recent Q1 report that was released by the CBN shows that loan loss provisioning by microfinance bank has surged by 520% from March 2020 to March 2021. It's currently at 233 billion. What that speaks to is the fact that a lot of microfinance are high risk. They've given out a lot of high risk loan, and there's a high chance of the level of the probability of default on those loans are quite high, and that's why you have the loan provisioning for those loans also paint high as well. Now, to speak to what the impact of the directive is from the CBN, it's simply the CBN coming out to say that we're trying to make sure that everyone is playing within the limits of what you're supposed to do. So there's a banking architecture in place, right? There's the CBN at the FX. Then you have the different commercial banks with different regulatory approvals. And then you have, some other banks, and then you have the microfinance bank, which is supposed to cater to the grassroots. Grassroots is supposed to cater for grassroots demand for financial services, right? So in terms of the impact, I think number one, it's probably not so good for business because as a business owner, you want to make profits. It's probably not so good for owners of microfinance bank, but I think it's good for the entire banking system architecture to make sure that everyone is playing within the scope that they're expected to play in. Yeah, so I think those would be the major impacts, of the directive from the CBN.
But generally speaking, now when we talk about microfinance bank, what space do they occupy? How impactful are they in the economy? Can we do without them?
In an ideal economy, you can't do without a microfinance bank. So above the microfinance bank, you have commercial banks. I like to put it this way. There's a wholesale market, there's a retail market, and then there's a micro market. Right. So within the wholesale and the retail market, you have commercial bank, dominating that space. But when it comes to the micro market would be the people you have at the extreme rural areas, of the country, up north, down south, right? So you ask yourself the question, who would be the financial service company to cater to those people? And considering the fact that, the government is bent on ensuring that we have a high rate of financial inclusion, it becomes imperative, to have this microfinance bank providing these services to make sure that we are able to achieve the level of financial inclusion we're trying to achieve. So is it possible to do without microfinance bank? I honestly don't think so, because if we don't have, a microfinance banking system, what it means is we're excluding certain part of the population from financial services, which is detrimental to what we're trying to achieve.
All right. Some of the challenges microfinance banks face here, regular changes in government policy, the lack of requisite human capital. Is there any way to give them, some succor in these areas?
So I think the first thing, let me start with the part of regulation. To be very honest, and let me state it clearly, you can have a very strong banking system without having, strong regulation from the CBN. So I wouldn't say that what the CBN is doing is wrong. I think what the CBN is doing is right. It's important to have strong financial regulation because, number one, you need to protect depositors' fund. Number two, you need to protect shareholders' capital. And considering the fact that Nigeria sort of, the dynamics of this economy is such that we have some support from, foreign portfolio investors. If we are going to continue to have that, it is important to ensure that every investment, that they are putting their money in is secure, especially in the financial service space. What I would just basically say in terms of giving succor to microfinance bank would be to ensure that, number one, board members and management of microfinance banks should always ensure that when they're coming up with internal policies, these policies should align with what the CBN is saying. Okay, because sometimes what you have is you have this distortion between what the internal policy of microfinance banks are and then what the CBN is trying to achieve, and that's why you see that, for instance, you can have a microfinance bank saying, okay, let's go ahead and give loans, above maybe 1 million per transaction, or let's say, give loans above 500,000 per transaction, depending on what class of microfinance bank it is. And that is, that counts as what the CBN has expressly told them to do. So in creating internal policies for microfinance bank, the people that are saddled with that responsibility should make sure that they have some sort of convergence with what the CBN is trying to achieve. It's also important to beef up capacity, in most of this microfinance bank, because to be very honest, there's a wide gap between, the performance of, the commercial banks, the deposit money banks, and then the microfinance bank. And while it is attributable to the fact that they have different, domains to play in and different scope, that they're supposed to operate in, it's important to also state that if, they can improve their own capacity through things like training and development, upskilling of their staffs, leveraging on technology, it's very, very likely that their performance, can sort of spiral upwards. I also think it's important for them, to have strong CBN support, because what I've seen, in my opinion, is, the CBN strongly supports, commercial bank. They do support microfinance bank, but I think, there has to be more support from them. Things like intervention, regular diagnosis of these banks to be sure which ones are currently, high risk. It's important for the CBN, to keep more tracks on these banks and also support them, with interventions to, to keep them afloat. So those would be my own recommendations.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Michael, for sharing your thoughts with us. And we certainly hope, as you've said, that the CBN will give more attention to the microfinance banks, especially because they are a major component in achieving financial inclusion in the country. Thank you so much, Michael Guremi, economist with Chapel Hill, Denham. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you very much.